Welcome to Art with Lórien, the place to reconnect with your inner artist and discover the joy of painting outside the lines. So welcome to episode 8. On today's episode, we will be incorporating all of the different skills and the activities that we've been practicing in the last 7 episodes. And I'm really excited because we're going to be able to apply everything that we've learned and use our color mixing skills, our color theory knowledge, our color scheme knowledge and practice, and then all the tints, tones, and shades and all of the colors of the color wheel into a simple painting. And so today we're painting shapes and learning about 2-dimensional shapes, what they are, and all the varieties of shapes, the expressions of shapes, and the properties of shapes, and then creating a painting using our color schemes. And so let's get started. I'd like to introduce the materials you'll be using. I'm using a different kind of watercolor paper tonight just to keep it fresh and show the variety. All of these things are listed in my art supplies link. This is a different watercolor paper than I used in episode 7. It's just it's a cold press. It's also a block and it has a rough finish. So I went ahead and released the sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and use this one. As well as the other episodes, I'm using my gouache paints. I'm using my brushes, the palette knife, pencil, spray bottle, palette, towel, apron. And I'm also going to request that you have just things that you can find around your house, which is a ruler or a straight edge. It can be a 12-inch or even smaller, 10 or 8. And then things that you can find to make circles with. You could even use a compass if you happen to have one. But we all have these kinds of things hanging around. This is a canning jar lid, and then this is a little coaster. So I just picked these up. You can use yogurt lids or anything that you find that's will make a circle that's round that will be easy to use as a stencil to trace. So have those things handy. If you have also things that you can make a triangle with, again, we can use our ruler to do that. But you will also require those little household odds and ends for this episode, for this lesson. And so I'd like to demonstrate and illustrate what I'm referring to when I talk about geometric shapes and organic shapes. And so I'm going to just use a pen here and draw a couple examples of both types. So a geometric shape would be, and I'm just going to freehand it, squares, triangles, circles, rectangles. And so that's that. And organic would be the 2 types, amorphic, which is like amoebas or clouds, so they're kind of freeform. We've painted like this before. And right? And so this would be my example of amorphic. You could also do, clouds that are wispy. But those could be anything. We can't say for sure what it is. Now, biomorphic is where we can say, okay, this is a heart. This is a star. This is a moon. This is a spiral. So geometric, they usually have their sharp edge, they're angular, they're pointed, and they have the qualities and the properties of shape are that they're measured, they're predictable, they're upright, they're used a lot. You see them a lot in architecture and man-made. And then the organic shapes are amorphic, which are freeform, and biomorphic, which are also, they're like more like outlines or things that we can name. So we can name all of these 4 shapes: the star, the moon, the spiral, the heart. And so for today's activity, we're going to start with asking the question, what is art? What is art? One way to look at art, to think about art, is that it's telling a story. And so just think about art, think about what it means to you and what it is. And then I'm going to offer up some information about what art was to the artists that were creating art after the camera was invented. And so what happened after the camera was invented and the camera could capture real life, the artists all over the world started to think, what am I going to do now? What am I going to paint? Because the camera exists, and so I can't paint real life. The camera's taking care of that. And so the artists came up with, it became more difficult actually, but they became more creative and inventive, and they invented abstract art, they invented conceptual art, they invented all sorts of art movements, and the art became about ideas and telling stories. And they told those stories through shapes, through symbols, through color. And so what we're going to do, like many of the artists that we'll be exploring, and especially Henri Matisse, the French artist, is we're going to tell one little story on our paper using colors to communicate, and then using some symbols and those shapes I talked about, geometric and the organic, the biomorphic and the amorphic shapes. And so a little bit about Henri Matisse. He is a French artist, and he was a painter, but when he became older and he became sick and he was in a wheelchair, he wasn't able to paint as much. He was in his bed a lot as well. And so he began to paint using paper and scissors. So he cut out, and he said, this is my paintbrush or my scissors. And he began to cut out colors and to put them together like a collage and glue them down, and then cut out little shapes, and then take the symbols and turn them into shapes. And so it became a very interesting way for him to produce art, and he produced lots and lots of art in that way. And you'll see some examples that I'm going to put up of his paintings. And so hopefully by now you're starting to think about this a little bit, and feel free to pause the video at any time to brainstorm. You can even write a paragraph or write some notes down about something that happened. Maybe it happened today or this year or earlier in your life, and think about that story and write down those things if you like, and then come up with the symbols. So for me, I've thought about some things and preparation, and what I'm going to use is a symbol of a spiral. And I know I'm going to use the spiral, and I also know I'm going to be using some of these circles. And so that's what I've kind of got in mind. I don't have it written or drawn out yet, but I've been thinking about this. And so that's what I would like you to do. So feel free to go ahead and pause the video, and then pick up when you're ready. So you'll be using your pencil, and what I'm going to ask you to do is, with your shapes and with your ideas here, take like your shape, let's say I use the circle, and make sure you do like 3 circles, or if let's say you're using a heart, do at least 3 hearts. So have a number of those symbols, and I'm going to start with my circle, so I'm going to be using a circle for sure. And as you compose your painting, I also want you to think about something called composition, and that's, how we kind of create the shot. Like we're taking a photo, we look through the viewfinder. Think about, you have this piece of paper, this is your canvas, your blank slate, and think about where you would like these things to go. And that's why a pencil is useful, because you can erase. But I'm just gonna, I'm gonna start with this larger circle, and I also want to give you a tool that would help you. There's something called the rule of thirds, and you'll see the graphic on the video. And I just drew these lines on here to show you. You don't have to draw lines on your paper. But I'm going to go ahead and put my circle in one of the hot spots. So the hot spots with the golden mean are where this X is, where this X is, where this X is, and this X. It's in the center kind of rectangle. So any one of these, not all of them, but one of them will be where the golden mean is, where your center point is, your focal point, where you want your most important symbol or shape to be. So I'm going to go ahead and put my circle there. Just going to draw it in. And another thing that you can do is with your shapes is you can overlap them. So this is what I have so far. And where the edges touch, you know, that says two things. It says this one's in front of this one, and then it also says, well, we know this one's bigger, but it creates a little bit of distance. It creates a little bit of dimension because of the way that this is now overlapping. This one looks in front, so now we have that aspect as well. And then so that's my geometric, so I'm gonna ask you to use some of the organic and some of the geometric. And now I'm gonna go ahead and use some of my organic shapes that are bimorphic. I'm gonna use my spirals. And I love spirals, so I'm gonna put a really big spiral here. It's gonna go right to the edge and then come around like that. And so it comes off the edge, so that means it's bigger than the paper, which is kind of interesting. And it's behind these circles as well. So I've created some distance, some space, and that dimension when things are overlapping. It says something's in front of the other thing. So these are just different principles of design that designers use and artists use to create a good composition, something that's harmonious to our eyes, that brings our eyes into that focal point and creates that balance on the paper. Okay, and now I'm going to use my pencil and my ruler to create a couple little squares. And feel free to measure, or what I do is, this might actually end up being a rectangle, is I eyeball it, I just look at it, and so I just created this little kind of rectangle. It's actually a rectangle. To make a square, you're going to want to measure. So if I want to do like a 1-inch square over here, I'm going to go like that. And then that's where the ruler comes in handy. You can use it to measure as well as a straight edge, something to make a straight line. And so at any time, just feel free to pause the tape or the video. Okay. So I've got a few angular, two geometrics, some other geometrics, a bimorphic shape, and now I think I'm going to put in an organic, amorphic, an amoeba or cloud-like freeform. And one last thing I'd like to talk about with your composition is the two kinds of shapes that are created when we draw and when we paint, and those are positive shapes and negative shapes. So the positive, I'm going to be painting inside here. These will be positive, and then the space around is the negative. So this is a lot of information. I know that I'll be talking about it more as we paint. And so let's segue and move into the painting and how you're going to choose your colors. What colors am I going to paint with? What colors do you get to paint with today and choose for yourself? So I'd like to present two options to you. One, they're both color schemes, and they're color schemes you're familiar with. One of them is complementary colors, and so referring to the color wheels, one of the color wheels we painted before, this is my tints color wheel. And just as a refresher, the complementary colors are opposite each other on the color wheel. And what they do is they contrast, they complement, and they make each other pop. They make the colors kind of buzz. And so the point, what I'd like you to do with this painting is with both color schemes, create that contrast, create that buzz, create that pop, and that energy. And the second option I'd like to present is to choose what are called the analogous or the harmonic colors, the colors that look good together, that are neighbors, that are sharing a hue on the color wheel. So for example, these purples are harmonic or analogous. The red, purple, purple, blue, purple. The blues are the blue, purple, the blue turquoise, the green. These, they're all sharing blue. That's how that works. Remember, we had an episode on this, and so you can always refresh and look at that episode. And so I've chosen an analogous or harmonic color scheme for my painting. I'm going to be using purple, one of my favorite colors, if not my favorite, and purple, blue, and green, blue. So those four, and some of the tints and shades of those. Okay, and so I don't know if I mentioned it, but it's really important to have all kinds of different brushes. You're going to be using different brushes to get in there and play with those shapes and your background and play with that. So have your flat brushes, your round, different pointed ones, different stiffnesses, and just different shapes, the assortment here, and your water, and then if I didn't mention it, your spray bottle. So I'm going to mix a really nice purple here. And so I said I was going to do purple, blue, purple, blue. This is a red purple. So I'm going to bring in some more blue for that. And a blue green, one of my other favorite colors. Okay. Here's my blue. Yeah, it's a really nice purple there. And my blue green. Now you don't just have to use these tubes. Remember this set that if you do have the 24, you can use them straight out of the tube, or if you don't, if you have a 12 color set, you know how to make every color with these primary 3 colors. So I'm going to mix with the primary colors so that I can demonstrate what you can do still with just these 3 colors, and it's kind of fun to mix paints. I like mixing paints. So I'm going to make a blue-green now. Get that ready. Okay. And even if you don't have palette knives, you can use your brushes to mix paints too, as you know. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, it's always nice to kind of get them saturated with water. And so let's start painting. I'm going to also get my blue, a little bit of a more blue or purple. All right. Okay. So as you know, you can start with a dry brush or a wet brush. And I recommended last episode you can spray the paper, but this time I'm not going to spray the paper. And the reason is I want to be able to work with my background and these shapes and not have everything blur together. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Now we have a background and the foreground, which are the shapes. So I'm going to put my background in. It might not all be this color. But I'm going to put this color in for starters. And then it's good to use a rectangular brush, or what's called a filbert, because you can get that little stiff edge up to your squares, up to your angled or angular shapes. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, was that shapes can be either angular or curvy. And angular shapes are like definitely the geometrics, definitely squares, rectangles, anything that you use a straight edge to make. Zigzags are angular, thunderbolts are angular, and they have an energy that's dynamic, it's intense, it's exciting. And so those qualities, those expressive qualities of shape come through when you paint those types of shapes. And then curvy shapes are more graceful. Our eyes follow along the lines or the edges, and they flow around. Our eyes flow around the edges of that shape. So the spiral, the circle, and they have like a more graceful, elegant, curvy shapes have a graceful, elegant effect, expressive quality to them. And so if you want your painting to have that feminine, kind of soft, graceful feeling, you'll put more of the curvy shapes. And then we're using both. I'm incorporating both curvy and angular shapes, and maybe you are too. And, okay, so now I'm going to bring in another purple here. And I'm going to bring it also into this other purple. And one thing I'd like to say, when you're painting, when you're in the creative process and you're painting, sometimes the painting doesn't look good to you, or it doesn't look nice to you. It's in process. It's like you put a cake in the oven and it's runny and it's batter. It has no shape. But once that cake cooks and it comes out and it's hardened and then you can eat it, it's great and it's yummy. But you wouldn't want to eat it when it's a liquid cake batter. And so it's the same with this painting. It's in process. It's not a finished product. I'm working on it, and it may take its own journey to get to the finish line, to how I want it to be. And so that's the cool part about the creative process, is you're going along and you're like, I don't know about this, but just stay with it. Even if, like I went over the lines here, it's totally okay. Because I can come back in and refine those. I can clean it up a little bit. And even if you change the shape of your shape using your paints, that's fine. And the reason is we are still painting outside the lines a little bit here, even though there are a lot of lines. You're the artist and you have creative license to change that. So I'm going to go ahead and get a smaller brush because I have these little areas that I'd like to get into. So I'm going to bring some of my paint off of this big, huge brush and come into some of those edges. And what really helps me is using my pinky as a stabilizer. You can also turn your paper if it helps you organize and get to those areas. Okay, I'm almost ready to bring in that white I talked about. I'm going to bring in this white now. Some of this white, just for interest and because it looks cool. It's nice to bring some variation. Using all of our skills, the tints, the tones, the shades, all those mixing skills. Tints being adding white tones, the grays, and the black making the darkest, the shades. Okay, now I'm going to bring this spiral all the way around. So this is my second curve of the spiral. And I'm also going to bring in my white. Just a little bit of white here. So I have this contrast that I talked about, where the colors are contrasting each other. So whether you're using the complementary, like the purple and the yellow, or the red and the green, or the orange and the blue, and they're popping, they're using each other's energy to increase the energy, to make them pop or buzz with energy. Or if you're doing what I'm doing in harmonics, using the harmonic color schemes or the analogous, and coming in with the lights and the darks of the colors as another way to contrast. So that's another thing that you can do. And what helps me personally when I'm doing this kind of work that's very, I would say, precise. Even if you go over, it doesn't matter, but if you like to stay on that line that you drew, is to help. It helps when I focus, of course, but to watch my breathing. And it really helps to have the right brush. Because if you have a brush that's too big for an area, it's going to be more difficult. So I'm about to change brushes again. And then, of course, having these square rectangular brushes with very stiff bristles help a lot. So I'm about to switch to a smaller brush for that little sliver. And I'm going to come in here. And I'm also going to bring in some white and have it, actually I'm going to put white here and then have it get darker. No, I'm going to leave it dark and then get lighter. All right. Okay. And of course, turning your paper helps. You always have full permission to turn your paper to get it in the way that helps you with your goal. So since there's a spiral, I'm turning it in the direction that it's moving. It's going in that direction. Okay, now I'm going to switch brushes and get a smaller flat brush. Over here. So this is a good size, so see the difference? This is going to make a huge difference. They're both still this very stiff brush. It's still a flat, but it's about half the size, and that's going to make all the difference in the world when I go to finish the inside of this spiral, or this little area here, actually. So I'm going to load it up with paint. and get really focused and come in here. And just coming in to close the spiral off, I'm going to get lighter, and as you'll notice with your painting, as it begins to get covered with paint, it's not a good idea to lean up against it or touch it with your arm or elbow or hand or pinky or anything like that. So just be aware of that. I almost did that myself, and it's like, oops, it's kind of wet now. Of course, if it's dry, that's different, but I have a wet painting here. Whoa. Okay, so I'm going to bring in that white that I talked about. That's going to look kind of cool. One thing you probably do notice is you have to hold your paper down. So I'm just coming in now and with my different colors, the purple right now, just to kind of get it the way I want it to look. I'm putting a little bit of water on the brush. I'm nearly complete with this painting, just to get it the way that I want it to look before I say it's done. And you know, the background is supposed to be kind of fun, and you can see the brush strokes, and I like that. And then I'm going to bring in some more white to make these shapes pop a little bit. So I'm going to do that as well before I finish. So let's go with this red here. This red was way too light, so I'm going to, or too much the same value as the background. So I'm going to add the white and bring in this lighter tint of this red purple, so it pops against that background more and it accomplishes that contrast I talked about. These little shapes here that are floating out in space. So these are positive, this would be the negative space, and I'm even going to add some of that lighter color here too. And just bring it in. I'm not going to completely repaint it, but I was looking at it and thinking, maybe this could be a little bit more poppy, a little bit more contrast. And I also like this kind of painterly look, it's called. So we're bringing in the brush strokes. You can see the brush strokes, see our spiral, and you can always do that. Refine your work. See if you're happy with the way that it looks before you say you're complete. And I think that's going to be that. So here's what I have for a painting focusing on shapes using colors of my choice. I chose harmonic color scheme out of the 2 color schemes presented. And so these are all these colors, the purple, the blue, the red purple, the blue-green in the harmonic family. And then I have some amorphic shapes, bimorphic, geometric, and then the composition I talked about earlier, which was using the rule of thirds. I focused the energy here, and so hopefully your eye is going to this part of the painting where the spiral is. And you know, even if there's more work I could do and to refine it, I'm going to leave it at that. And even when I go ahead and say, okay, this is how I'm going to frame it or hang it or display it or exhibit it, it's nice to experiment with how might it look the most pleasing to you. Is it in this portrait format in this direction? Is it the landscape format in this direction? Is it the portrait like this? Or is it the landscape layout like this? And that's something you as the artist can decide aesthetically what is most pleasing to your eye. And you know, that will maybe grow on you. Maybe you put it on your wall there's the weight of the painting is here. And so when we have it here, you can feel the weight balance is in this section here. And so maybe that's not my most favorite orientation, but maybe you like it. And so when you sign your paintings, you can always sign in pencil lightly somewhere on the front or on the back. And so if you sign on the back, that gives the viewer or the collector, or if it's yourself or if it's a gift, that person can hang it or display any orientation they like. That's one good thing about signing work on the back. But yeah, so that's what I have. Hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll be exploring shape next time. Until then, I'll see you in the studio.